always a pleasure to see you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Nice to be with you.
So let's talk about the tax plan. He's got, for example, 4 brackets, 0, 50% of the people don't pay any tax, 10%, 20%, and 25%. This is individual. Then I want to get to the corporate taxes. Obviously, taxes are coming down, Maya, but your question is always, how do you pay for it?
Right. So cutting taxes doesn't work in terms of fiscal responsibility, how it would affect the debt, unless you increase other taxes, and I'll talk about that, or you cut spending. And so far, we haven't heard any of the plans that would actually offset the huge cost of bringing those rates down. Now, you can actually keep taxes growing in revenues or revenue neutral if you bring rates down, which can be very good for the economy, and broaden the base. Right now, we lose over $1 trillion a year in targeted tax breaks from credits and exclusions and deductions and exemptions. If we get rid of a lot of those, which would also simplify the tax code, make it more efficient in many ways, we'd have a lot of revenue to play with and could bring those rates down. We haven't heard specifics on that. That said, Mr. Trump did say he's going to announce a lot of ways he would broaden the tax base in the coming days. That will make a big difference, sort of the details of filling in some of the harder parts of this tax plan, and we will see. So far, though, what this plan would do is add about $10 trillion to the debt. And at a time when we have record debt levels, that would be very ill-advised.
What about the idea, because Steve Moore came on the show yesterday, and he said, listen, Trump is trying to expand the base so much that it actually moves the needle on economic growth. He's looking at 4% economic growth or even higher as the years go out. When you expand economic growth, I mean, we're at like 2% right now, Maya, as you know, does that actually, do you connect the dots there that you get more revenue?
Growing the economy would be one of the best ways that we could generate revenue. Growing the economy is an ideal for many, many reasons. There's one problem. It's very difficult to control. Most of the growth we're likely to see in the economy because of these demographic challenges that we face, where the baby boomers are now moving into retirement, are going to come from increasing productivity. And that has been something that's been hard to control in the past. I would say that a 4% growth rate, while a nice goal to shoot for, is highly unrealistic based on what we've seen in the past. 3% looks to be more realistic. So what we don't want to do is kind of wave a magic economic growth wand and pretend that that's going to fix everything. You want to have reasonable estimates and then put in policies in place that would help grow the economy. Tax reform is one of those. Regulatory reform, spending reform, those would all help grow the economy, but let's not pretend it's going to fix the problem. It's not. There are real policy choices still involved.
Maya, it's Dagan McDowell. When people talk about broadening the base, that essentially means that some people today who aren't paying any taxes or net income taxes are going to have to pay something. And Donald Trump initially promised that half of American households would not pay any federal income tax. See, again, broadening the base doesn't win elections, right? That's what I'm getting at.
Well, there's 2 reasons that broadening the base can be difficult. You actually could broaden the base in a way that it affected high-income earners more. And one of the ways to do that, I actually had a plan that came out with Marty Feldstein a number of years ago that looked at capping all the tax breaks for the well-off. So you could say you can't have tax breaks more than X% of your income. And you could make that in a progressive way. But the problem, another challenge, in addition to what you brought up, which is the distributional effects of tax reform and broadening the base, is a lot of those tax breaks people love. So when we talk about broadening the tax base and bringing in some revenue to bring down rates and simplifying the code, you get a lot of head nodding. But then when you let people know that includes the home mortgage interest deduction, the health care exclusion, state and local taxes, oh, wait, I really like those tax breaks. So the truth is, tax reform is hard. We really should do it. It will be beneficial for so many reasons. But we can't, just like we can't pretend we can grow our way out of the problem, we can't pretend that tax reform is easy. There are winners, there are losers. We need to have a real discussion about the trade-offs, and I hope at least we could agree our tax code desperately needs to be reformed.
I want to get your take on what Trump said about debt. But first, let me turn to the other side for a second, because Hillary Clinton is taking aim at Trump's economic agenda while making a few announcements of her own. Listen to this, Maya. I'd like to get your reaction.
Their economic approach still is totally aimed at the top. If you get a hold of Donald Trump's plan for the taxes of this country, it is trickle-down economics on steroids. Slash taxes on the wealthy. It is a billionaire's plan for other billionaires. My husband, who I'm going to put in charge of revitalizing the economy, because, you know, he knows how to do it.
What do you think about that? Bill Clinton's economic record, it's far from perfect, but of course, in the 90s, we were in a moment in time, and they did expand growth as well as lead the deficit reduction and got us to a not only a balanced budget, but a budget surplus.
So there's no question that the economy performed very well under President Clinton, and there are a number, many reasons for that. Two of the big ones, I do think that he took an impressive lead on fiscal responsibility. Once he got into office, he looked at the situation. It was worse than he'd realized, and he changed some of his policies. He made hard choices. That's what we're going to have the next president do. At the same time, he was greatly aided by a huge boom in the economy and a bubble. So we had very high revenues, capital gains areas, a lot of unanticipated revenues that closed that gap faster than we thought it would. But it also was a bubble that later popped. And we've had a lot of bubbles in the economy. We've been bouncing from one bubble to the next, which is still leaving us with a very kind of weak fiscal and economic underpinning for overall long-term growth.
Yeah, it was that, it was that dot-com bubble, for sure.
Exactly. It was a tech bubble. But I would give him credit for having made some policy choices, the same types we are going to have to look to for the next president. And the main thing they're going to have to look to is entitlement reform, something that President Clinton didn't get as far. He had hoped to reform Social Security. That didn't happen. That is long overdue.
And real quick on Donald Trump's comments on debt. I guess initially there was some worry about how he would approach it, but he's walked back those comments in terms of, yeah.
That's right. He's walked back. But one of the problems is debt markets, treasury markets, borrowing is one of those areas that's very important, not only for the fiscal health of the country, but it has the underpinning of our overall markets. We're the safe haven right now.
Right.
Our treasuries market affects the global economy. And the things he said when he talked about renegotiating our debt, our sovereign debt, and then haircuts, and then printing money, all sent shivers through the economy. And I think the problem was he drew way too many parallels from the private sector debt markets to federal debt. And you need to understand the workings of it. They're not the same thing at all. You need to understand that before you start throwing around policies. And I think many of us were quite concerned with kind of the off-the-cuff remarks.
Yeah, that was the issue for sure. Maya, good to see you. Thanks so much.